Hello my dear friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara, and today we're going to be looking at how your emotions, your feelings are connected to the God source. So you guys can look at it as God, source, creator, whatever term you guys want to use. Your emotions are directly connected to this. So in this video, I will be going over this. Now, this is going to be based off of my own personal experience, observations. So you guys can take what resonates and leave behind what does not. I am not saying by any means that this is the only and ultimate truth. This is just what I have noticed by just existing here in this world on this earth plane. So your emotions are super important, and they are your direct connection to God, source, creative energy, the creator, so on and so forth. So a lot of the time it's really interesting because your emotions are in your heart space, yes, but they're actually also in your sacral chakra. This is really interesting. I found that out once as well. So your vulnerability, the ability to be vulnerable, is actually directly connected to your sacral chakra. Now it's also connected to your solar plexus, because you have to have the confidence in yourself to speak your emotions. And it wasn't until recently that I noticed what an issue this is within this world. Something that I've been thinking about lately is just like how people just like have not been seeing each other as human. And I find that people have not seen each other as human because of the fact that they're so disconnected from their emotions. And then when you're disconnected from your emotions, you're disconnected from yourself, is really what that is. You're disconnected from your authenticity, what makes you you, who you truly are as a person. And it's really unfortunate because it's like anything that is more feminine energy leaning in this earth plane, which are emotions, the feeling, the intuition. There's obviously more components to the feminine energy, but for the sake of this video, we're going to be focusing on just those. All of these things are demonized, is really what that is on this earth plane. Now, it's important to understand that we all have masculine and feminine energy within us. This is really important. You're going to have a core energy that you operate out of, and this is always going to be regardless of genders. You're going to have a core energy that you operate out of, and then you're still going to have some of the other energy, but it's like there's a lot of wounding on this earth plane, so a lot of these energies are seen in like a wounded lens. Maybe another day I can make a video going over actual traits that are masculine and feminine energy within, but it's like anything that is feminine energy leaning or focused is usually either demonized, looked at negatively. It's not monetized if we look at that as well. If we look at it as like a capitalistic system, it's usually types of feminine energy, let's say jobs or like traits or like anything that is more feminine maybe isn't compensated as much as something that is a little bit more masculine energy leaning. And to be honest, the way that I see like the current masculine energy on this earth plane is actually very wounded as well. It's actually shadow masculine. It's not true masculine energy, the true divine masculine. I guess you guys can look at it this way as well. So regardless of gender, we all have these energies within us. The feminine energy are your emotions. And it's like what I've been thinking about lately is like a lot of people who aren't in their heart space are usually stuck in their lower three chakras. So you have the root chakra, the sacral, and the solar plexus. Now, I have videos exploring the chakras where I tell you guys everything that I personally have learned about the chakras thus far. I just use the chakras kind of as like a reference point because it's like that's just how I've personally compartmentalized the energy. So when I feel into the energy about something within society, like let's say it's an abandonment wound, connects me to the solar plexus chakra. So that's just how I've compartmentalized it. It doesn't mean that this is the ultimate truth and that like solar plexus is always connected to the abandonment wound. That's just how I personally have compartmentalized the energies. And by compartmentalizing the energies, that's how I observe people, how they behave, where they're operating out of within their bodies. And I'm personally clairsentient, so I can always feel within their body where they're operating out of within myself. So with that being said, that's kind of how I come to a lot of these conclusions. So what I've noticed a lot of the time, and up until this point, we've had a lot of focus on partnerships. And like the whole concept with partnerships at one point in time was like the masculine, like the person, whoever was more in the masculine energy was going to be operating out of their lower chakras. They're going to be more grounded in this earth plane. And then you have the person who's operating more out of the feminine. They're going to be in the higher chakras. And like when these chakras are balanced, you're operating out of the heart space. Personally, I feel like we're going through such an accelerated change and we're going into the higher vibrations that you can actually achieve these energies now within yourself. Now, I'm not going to go too much in depth in terms of like the esoteric meanings of this and how we have evolved through time, but that's the overall idea. Like that's why we used to have the partnership, or that's why we even have like the concept of like divine masculine, divine feminine, like divine unions, twin flames, so on and so forth, because at one point we were whole within ourselves and then we eventually fell energetically. Okay, if we look at like the whole history of just like the mysticism and so on and so forth. So we fell and we separated into the two genders. Now you can kind of see even like physically, right? People are starting to look more like each other. Energetically, they're starting to become more balanced with their masculine and feminine energy within. We're coming closer and closer and closer to this balance within the self. So the whole point of this, what I'm saying to you guys, is like you can achieve this within the self. unfortunately you'll see right now that certain individuals within the collective are maybe struggling, and those people that are struggling are stuck in a way in their lower chakras. I don't want to say stuck because sometimes people hear stuck and they think of it as like a negative thing or like you can't get out of it. It's just like you're really in their lower chakra wounding. So sometimes people who are in the lower chakra wounding, because they aren't necessarily connected to their heart space, those are the people who can easily become energy vampires. They're going toward the people who are in the higher vibrations and the higher chakras, perhaps, whether it's naturally or they've worked on themselves to get into those higher chakras, and then the lower chakra being attaches to the person with the higher chakras. And it's like at that point, for whatever reason on this earth plane, I just find that the dark energy, like when someone's pulling you down, a lot of the time you're gonna have to really fight this energy to not be pulled down into the lower chakras with that person, but rather to see how can you pull them up. And for whatever reason, up until this point, I don't know if it's like a person who's maybe in the higher chakras might have wounding within themselves or whatever it is, that they energetically get pulled down, but you actually want to go up into the higher chakras. So the higher chakras are going to be your throat chakra, your third eye, and your crown chakra. Like these are the spiritual chakras, and a balanced individual is going to be operating out of the heart space. So it's kind of been like this dance up until this point, energetic dance, I guess you can say, of just like the darker energies pulling people down into their lower chakras. This has to do with a lot of things, actually. Some of it could be survival, which is the root chakra. Some of it could be like the wounded sacral chakra, which is hypersexualization, or even repression of sexuality, or like shame connected to sexuality, or just like shame as an emotion overall in general, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of like expressing yourself and your emotions. Then we have the wounded solar plexus, which is like abandonment. Also in the sacral, we have codependencies as well. So that's on a range, because codependency can be drugs, but it can also be like a love addiction, like you're codependent on another person. And this is like through like so many millennia or like years at this point of just like programming is really what that is, where people became codependent on each other. But mainly the whole thing here is it's like the person who's in the lower chakras that would hook into the higher vibrational person, or the being, or whoever is the person that is in the higher chakras, like the more spiritual chakras, they would hook into them. And a lot of the time they have been pulling this individual down. So I think everything has been kind of inverted and backwards and topsy-turvy and all of this. So the whole thing here is like the person who is in the lower chakras, who is more in their wounding, who is in all of these wounds that I mentioned previously, and there's so many more. I talk about it in the Exploring the Chakras videos. But the person who's in this wounding has to focus on healing themselves, clearing themselves, and seeing how can they activate the heart space. Because a lot of the time, someone who ends up being in their lower chakras, or just like focus on the lower chakras, or like really focus on the material plane, and like it's hard to say because the material plane has been material up until this point. It's been all about money, getting the gains, getting the wealth, so on and so forth. But we're moving out of this time at this point in time. So it's like, this is why a lot of people are going through ego death and all these types of things. And like when someone goes through an ego death, they don't know who they actually are, because it's like you place a lot of your identity on something that's outside of you versus something that's inside of you. And usually if you're going more within and you're going back into that heart space, like I was mentioning at the beginning of this video, you're actually connected to God's source, the creator. And it's like when you're connected to God's source and the creator, this is how you become the manifester. And it's interesting because especially in the Western world, like when we look at a lot of manifestation conversations or techniques, it's always around material things, or it's around things like to do with possession, or like being possessive. Like it's about how to get a person or how to bring that person into your life. And it's like those aren't higher vibrational things or like wants or needs. That's why sometimes like those things don't come through for people, because it's coming from an ego driven place. So a lot of the time you'll have to see like if something's not quote unquote manifesting for you, well in that case it could be coming from an ego driven place, and the only person that will know this is you. You're gonna have to do that self exploration to see like, am I doing this for ego driven reasons? And that's again being stuck or trapped, or just like operating out of the lower nature, or just like the wounding, or just like the lower chakras but in their shadow. Okay, is really what that is. You need the balance. You need to still be grounded. You can't spend all day in your crown. That's the thing. Like at the end of the day, it still is a material plane, so you will need material things, of course, like that's still there. But I'm kind of giving you guys extreme examples so you can kind of see the difference between the two energies. So when you're in connection, okay, with your heart space and your emotions and the feeling aspect of life, at that point you're connected to God's source, okay, or God or source or creator, whatever term you guys want to use, because it's like this is then what's going to be leading you and what's going to be guiding you. And this is when you'll see when you are in alignment with that intuition, that intuitive muscle, the feeling, the emotions. It's like you're being led in a divine way, and you'll know because within your body it feels positive, it feels high vibrational, it feels fulfilling. So a lot of the time people think that they're going to be fulfilled by getting a lot of material things or acquiring a lot of material items, and it's fine. Sometimes you will see this, let's say in people's natal charts, maybe it is part of their life purpose to get a lot of items, okay? Because I know a lot of the time when we talk about spiritual concepts, like especially in the spiritual like community or just like the way that they perceive things, a lot of the time they're going to talk about like material things, or they're going to demonize them in a shadow sense. Like, it's not this, okay? We've evolved thus far for a reason. I'm just talking more so about just like what is emotionally fulfilling for you at the end of the day, because I find that when you're in your heart space and you're operating out of like, again, the intuition, and you're going in alignment is really what that is, with something that is higher vibrational, it's more fulfilling, and then the other things will come. That's how I see it. Like, you end up getting the material things and so on and so forth if you're not so much focusing on them. If you're focusing on them too much, and it's going to be a little bit counterintuitive, is like usually you're operating out of a place of lack, or you're doing it again for ego-driven reasons. It's like, when I get this, I'm gonna feel like this, or when I get this, then I'll get this type of person in my life, and so on and so forth. And that's all ego. And it's like a lot of the time you'll see people maybe aren't fulfilled in like their relationships or their situation or their jobs, and it's like probably because you were going after it for an ego-driven reason, or you were going after that person for an ego-driven reason. You weren't connected to your heart space. But for you to be connected to your heart space, and like this is a whole other layer, I guess, of this conversation, is like you have to be within your body is really what that is. Like, you have to be able to feel is really what that is. And it's like, this is how you'll be able to sense when someone is, let's say, like more in like the bot energy, I guess you can say, or just like not sentient in a way, because they're not really there on that emotional level, which I do believe there are some people around like that are just like empty vessels and that aren't necessarily energetically human. But it's like what makes someone human, or like you can feel the person, is when they have that emotional energy taking place. They have the feeling, and it's like through this everything else comes. I hope that really makes sense. So it's like when you're connected to the feeling, you're connected to the emotion, then you're fulfilled. You're not really seeking outside of you anymore for someone to, let's say, to validate you, or like when you get this thing, you're going to be validated, or like it'll be this type of experience, and so on and so forth. Like, everything then comes, because honestly, it's just like a shift in frequency is really what that is. And it's like when you do get things, then you will be happy or appreciative of them, or you will enjoy them. It's not kind of like that lower vibrational energy. Sometimes I see kind of like a type of entity that hooks into people that just wants more and more and more and more. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, especially if it's like material things and these types of things, and it's like, let's say you've already achieved a goal, and then like maybe you're not happy when you get it, and you want the next thing, and you want the next thing. And a lot of the time, if you're in that vibrational energy, it's like there's something that's taking place within you where it's like it's not fulfilling you, because it's like there's something there that is missing. And like, this is gonna sound corny, but at the end of the day, like really what it all comes down to is love, is really what that is. And it's like, you can understand this concept, but then there's also the feeling aspect of things. And personally, I feel like love is connected to God. I feel like people seek this in other people, but you're actually meant to find it within yourself. And when you come into that union, now we're talking about that divine masculine feminine energy, but within, you're not looking for it in another person. Only then will you feel happy, fulfilled, let's say in your relationships, in your friendships, your romantic relationships, like all these types of things, and your circumstance in life. So it's like, it's interesting to see, because if you look at the religious scriptures and like the origins of it all, I've read the spiritual versions of these texts. The ones these days and like the interpretation of them these days are like very shadow masculine. Like, they're not what they were originally intending. So it's kind of become like broken telephone is the way that I see the current perception of religion. But if you look at the roots of all of them, you'd have to look at all of them and be neutral and like see what are the common threads in like the religious scriptures, or just like the ancient scriptures overall, or like the texts and so on and so forth. Like, all of these texts, like they're basically trying to teach people enlightenment is really what that is. And like what I've come to conclude thus far is like people are looking for that connection to God. God is actually within you ultimately at the end of the day. I'm sure you guys have heard that a lot, but it's like also God is love is really what it is. That's what I've come to conclude thus far. So it's like when people are looking for like love in another person, or like love through this, or like when they get a pet, like all those things are great, but you'll see that it's temporary. I hope that makes sense. Like maybe you'll get a glimpse of this emotion, and you'll eventually kind of like go back to whatever your state was prior to that. So it's like if your state is always in the love vibration and the love frequency, when you kind of achieve that balance within is really what that is. You've kind of balanced those chakras, the lower vibrational things and the higher vibrational things. The way that I always saw it was like when you have the lower 3 chakras balanced and the higher 3 chakras balanced, you operate out of the heart space. At that point, you don't go into that whole like material aspect of things, if that makes sense. Like you're not looking for possessions anymore, in the sense where it's like even a person, like you're not possessing a person. Like all these lower vibrational things where it's like you're possessing a person and you have this type of house and this type of car and all these things, and like that's fine. Once again, some people like it's part of their life purpose to get material things. Maybe they didn't get it in a past life, but it's like it always depends on the energy behind it all. And I feel like this is the root of everything. Like I think the root of everything is people are looking for love is really what that is. But the love that they're looking for is actually within themselves, and what they're actually looking for is their connection to God. and to source and to the creator is really what that is. It's just unfortunate because religion has been so misinterpreted, seen through a very like 3D, I guess you can say, lens, like a very material lens, like not from like a spiritual perspective. And it's like religion has also been perceived from like this gender has to strictly do that and this gender has to strictly do this. And I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think people activate things within each other, and the ultimate thing is like you want to get to that point within the self. So that's kind of what I've come to conclude thus far. So that's the whole thing here. You want to get in tune with your emotions. You want to get in tune with your feelings, because when you're in tune with yourself and you've cleared maybe the lower vibrational emotions or feelings, like it really clears a lot of things for you. Because it's like a lot of the time I find that people are trying to mask an emotion or they're trying to mask a feeling. And when I say mask, I don't just mean like hide it from the world. I just think like people are not even aware within themselves. Like let's say they have a certain type of addiction, whether that is like shopping all the time. It can be any type of addiction, honestly, because addiction is on a huge range. But it's like I do find that like they're going into that compulsive behavior. And by the way, I'm not a psychologist or like in the medical field in any way, shape, or form. These are just my own conclusions. So you guys can take what resonates and leave behind what does not, and come to your own conclusions always. I'm just throwing out there what I have observed and learned thus far. But it's like I find that when someone goes into this like addictive tendency or pattern of like that compulsive behavior, like what they're doing is they're trying to mask an emotion, and it's usually a negative emotion, and you're gonna have to get to the root of what is that negative emotion that you're feeling. And honestly, I could talk about this so much in so many different layers, because another video that I will be making as well is going to be romantic obsession, and this is another type of addiction, because it's like that's also masking that lack of love within, is really what that is. So ultimately at the end of the day, what everyone is seeking and looking for is love. It's that heart space, it's that connection really to something higher, larger than life, and you can find that within yourself after you clear, heal, integrate, and purge. And it's like relationships are going to be mirrors. They're going to teach you these things, but ultimately at the end of the day, it is in your hands. You don't want to put it on another person. You don't want to go externally. It is all within you. So I'm going to wrap up this video here. I do hope you guys enjoyed my video on why your emotions are your connection to God, source, the creator, and why getting in tune with your emotions is really, really important, because you don't want to be depending on another person either. Back in the day when it's like one of the individuals was in the lower chakras, they were depending on the person in the higher chakras to bring through that energy for them, to bring through that connection to God's source for them. You don't want to be in that energy either. You want to be sovereign is the term. It's interesting. I haven't used that term in a while, but it's this sovereign energetically in your own energy. And from there, everything is different because it's a vibrational thing. Everything is high vibrational. Your relationships are more healthy. Everyone is more happy ultimately, because you're not depending, you're not possessing, you're not in those lower vibrational emotions. So I hope you guys enjoyed my video. If you did, please do like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day.